Welcome back to the channel, and in this video we're going to take a look at something that if you have taken any of my classes at the local campus here, this is one of the things I like to give them for extra credit. So I'm going to just kind of show you some tricks and trades of how to do this in an efficient way using AutoCAD. So we're going to be looking at this using AutoCAD 3D. Alright, so let's go ahead and jump over and get started. Okay, so before we get started here, there are some things I want to point out to you just to make sure that you can kind of understand totally what's happening here, right? So remember that anytime we're making a thread, we're going to need a few things that we need to define, right? So we either need to give it a pitch, which is what we have here. So this is all that this is telling me is how far is it between threads to the other thread. That is going to be the pitch, right? Here's the thread profile or a cutter, if you like to think of it. So this is what's going to be making the actual threads. So with this spinning around that helix, right? And we're going to need that diameter of that helix, which we do have sitting here at 10. So these are going to be the more important things that we need to create, right? So if we don't have this thread profile, we have no intentions of how to cut this thread. This is some stuff that you could find in some kind of machiner's book. Typical threads are going to either have a 60 degrees, you have someone with a 29 degrees. It just depends on what type of threads, and you can find that stuff. One thing that you don't see on this drawing, and it's kind of typical on any time you have a bolt of this nature, is that there's usually a chamfer sitting right here, right? There is really no standard to this. We don't want to make that chamfer too big and we don't want to make it too small. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to gauge it somewhere between a 1 or a 2. You know, I don't know exactly what I'm going to use, but we're going to see that whenever I create this, right? So I have that, and then I have the height of my helix that's going around here. Now, with both of these numbers, I'm not going to stick exactly to these numbers, meaning that this 22, yes, my chamfer height will be, not chamfer, my cylinder height will be 22. But my helix is going to be a little bit longer, because what I'm going to do with this helix is I'm going to purposely start it a lot below what my cylinder is here. And then I'm going to finish that helix somewhere up here above it, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spin this helix around, and it's going to go higher than my thread. Reason being is that I want, when it cuts into this thread here, I don't want it to just have a stop immediately right here at the end. And here at the bottom, I don't want it to start. So if you got to think about when they're actually creating threads on some of this stuff, they're using a lathe or some kind of cutter. That tool comes in, and that's exactly what this is this is a tool that will be used to cut the thread. It's going to come in, and usually they set it down here at the bottom. And then once it starts spinning, it makes its way up, right? Now, in the real world, if you're creating a bolt, they do have a shoulder relief somewhere here, right? They actually don't cut it all the way up to the top here. They usually have a shoulder release. And that's usually for when you're spinning this and going up this cut. So you have a place to where this tool can pull out at, and it doesn't cut all the way up into your part. But for 3D purposes, we don't need to show that. In the real world, yes, we would actually have to have a thread relief put here at the top, right? But for what we need on this extra credit, I'm just going to go ahead and run it all the way up here to it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create the top. One other interesting thing is that we see here at the top is that this little kind of cut here that goes around here. Now, once again, this is made in the real world, and the way this is made is that we have to put some kind of profile right here. They don't tell you the angle of that, but there is a standard angle to make this, right? So if we're cutting here, this standard angle here that we go down, and you may have seen this in another video that I created another thread at, this angle here is a specific number. It does not change. It's going to be a 30 degrees angle here. Right? So when you see me create this, I'm going to put a 30-degree kind of profile here. And that should be everything that we're going to need to be able to create this. And I'm sorry for the long intro here, but I wanted to make sure I explained every single thing to you. So when we create this, there should not be any kind of thing that you're looking at going like, well, why did he do it this way? And why did he do it that way? Right? Okay. So this is what we're going to create. and let's go ahead and have fun with it and see what we can do with this. All right, so let's now jump over to AutoCAD and then go ahead and get started on this part, right? Okay. All right, so here in AutoCAD, I'm going to be using the 3D modeling. So if your ribbon doesn't look like mine, you can always select this sprocket down here at the bottom corner here, and I'm selecting the 3D modeling, and that's going to get you here, right? So I'm on the Home tab. This is the way I'm going to start this. Now, I'm just going to do some regular 2D drafting of the components that I'm going to need, and I'm not going to need that many, believe it or not, right? So let's go ahead and get started on this portion, right? So we're going to start off just by creating a circle that has a diameter of 10. So that's going to be my cylinder. Now, there are some primitive commands that I can use and create that cylinder just right off the bat here. So I can either use this option or I can use the circle. So when I get to extruding this circle, I will show you that using this command, it's going to be a lot simpler, right? But I'll show you both ways, so don't worry about it. All right, let's start off with a circle, just in case if I didn't know that that cylinder was there. I'll choose a center diameter. I'll click here, and then I'll make my diameter of this one 10. So that's no problem. Next thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and create a cutter profile, right? So let's kind of zoom in a little bit, as this thing should be small. I'm going to start off with the line. I'm going to go straight down. Let's go ahead and put our ortho on. And then we're going to come down and I'm going to type in 1.125, right? So that's going to be the length that I need. Zoom in and get a little bit more work closer to this. I'm going to draw a line now from this midpoint going this direction at a distance of 0.8119. Oh, 9. Okay, so that's what I have here, right? Now I'm going to draw another line here. So I'm just going to create a line, and I'm just using L enter. I'm going to click here, come straight down, and I'm going to type in 0.1875, hit enter. Okay, now that should be all the stuff that I need. Now what I'm going to rely on is that one of these numbers may not be totally exact, right? So you have to determine which one of these that I want to use. And what I'm meaning by that is, and I'll show you here, this number might actually be perfect, but sometimes in the real world, this number just is close enough. It just depends on the decimal that you call this out at. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move this little tab to here. And I'm going to do that by selecting this object. I'll grab this center grip, and then I'll click it on this endpoint. Okay. So the next thing I need to do is I'm going to rotate this line here, and I'm going to rotate it up 30 degrees this way, and I'm going to rotate it down 30 degrees that way. So that's going to give me my 60 degrees in between that. So I'm going to select this line. I'm going to select this grip. We're going to hit the space bar until we see the word rotate down there. So you have to select it twice. I have rotate, then I'm going to select the word copy. Now I'll type in 30, enter, -30, enter. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the escape button twice. That'll clear out the grips. Let's go ahead and take a look at this. We're going to select this line here. I'm going to select this endpoint. I'll hit the space bar one time and then click on that endpoint, hit escape twice. I'm going to select this line here. I'll select this grip, the space bar one time, and then I'll place it on this endpoint. Okay. Now what I'm meaning by this is that if I fillet this, we can assume that it's going to be exactly at this endpoint. It may not be. So I just usually use the fillet command and leave this up to that. So what I was trying to refer to earlier is that I could have selected here and I could have rotated this line from here and placed it on these endpoints. And then it's going to be depending upon, you know, basically wherever it lands on here. Okay. But let's just go ahead and use the fillet command. So just remember F enter. I'm going to go to radius. That radius should automatically be set to 0, but I always like to verify it. So if it's set to 0, go ahead and hit the enter button. And then we're going to use the multiple option. So let's go to multiple. We're going to select this line here to here, right? And we're going to do the exact same thing here at the bottom. So I'm just going to select this line and this one. Let's go ahead and hit the escape button. And then we can delete this center line here. And so now I made my cutter. I'm just going to highlight all of this and type in J, enter. And that just tells it to join it. You can see I have those 4 objects converted into one polyline. All right, so the cutter is now made, right? So now we have our cylinder here and we have our cutter made. Next thing I need to do is go ahead and make the polygon that's sitting on top of it, right? Shortcut for the polygon is POL, or you can actually see the icon here. Okay, now let's go ahead and click on the polygon command here. And now it's going to ask me how many sides. I'm going to tell it that I have 6 sides. Hit enter. Should ask me for where I want to place the center. I'll place the center here. And then I need to know if it's inscribed or circumscribed. Now, after I give you the answer here, I'll jump back over to the drawing and show you what I mean by this, right? So, do I know where the endpoints is, or do I know where the sides are? In our case, we do know where the sides are. So I'm going to go circumscribed. Now it's going to start creating my shape, right? Now I need to give it that distance to go across here. Now remember that we have a diameter. I need to specify and put in a radius. This is one of the problems with AutoCAD, is that if I type in the radius, which is going to be 15.57, and then try to divide that number by 2, because that's the diameter that goes across, and hit enter, it's going to say, hey, I can't figure that out, right? And you would think for a program to be this smart that it should be able to figure out that distance, right? Now, there are 2 ways that we can do this. One way is if we move the decimal over 2 places, right? So I can type in the number of 1557 and divide this number by 200, right? This number will give me the exact same measurement that I need, right? And if I hit the enter button, you're going to see that it will create that. That's one option that you have. Another option that you can use is that I can go back to the polygon command. I have 6 sides. I'll go ahead and hit enter. I'll pick the center here. I'll use the circumscribed. And then as I'm creating this, if I don't know that number and I don't know that little trick I just showed you, you can always type in apostrophe CAL, hit enter, and then I can type in the value, which is going to be 15.57 divided by 2. Hit enter, and then it will calculate that. Now, the only problem with this is that you see that it did rotate this, and it did it in both of them, right? We have to know what that rotation is to get this thing straight. Or I can leave it at this rotation. In our case, in 3D, it really doesn't matter. Both of these are going to work exactly the same, right? Okay. So, you can choose whichever method that you want to use. I'll go ahead and delete this one. It doesn't matter which one you delete. Also, I was just thinking there's another way that I could show you how to create a cylinder, right? We got 3 different ways. So I have a circle here. The next one I'm going to create is with a rectangle. So I can select this rectangle. I can click here. And then I can give it this other coordinate, which is going to be 5,22. And if I hit enter on that, this will actually create a cylinder as well if I revolve this right around one of these vertical lines. So many different ways of creating a cylinder. I have many different ways of creating, this polygon here. And with only one way of creating this cutter. You just got to make sure you be kind of careful. The benefit of doing this one this way is that I can go ahead and put the chamfer on here right now. So if I type in chamfer, CHA, hit enter, then I give it a distance, which is going to be D-enter, and then I can type in that distance. Now remember I said that number is going to either be 1 or 2. Let's try and see what 1 looks like. So I hit 1, and then it says give me the number of the second one. By default, I'll just hit enter. And then I'll just tell it I want to make this chamfer right at this corner. So you'll see that I can put a chamfer here already, and then when I revolve this around, that's already created. So I'm going to leave you with all of these different options on the screen, and I'll start deleting them as we get closer to what we need to create here. Now, the other benefit of doing this is that I can go ahead and put that cutter here and do some other things. But let's go ahead and take a look at the Inventor portion of it. Well, sorry, not the Inventor. The 3D portion of it now here in a second. If you want, I can go ahead and already create this other profile here, but I usually like to wait a little bit so I can create that shave that goes around there. Now, talking about the circumscribed versus inscribed, what it basically means is that do I know from this point here, which we can assume that this is the center, do I know the distance from here going out to this endpoint? And you can see that, no, I don't know that number. Or do I know the distance from this endpoint going out to a side? And you can tell that this dimension here is measuring from this side to this side, right? If it was inscribed, what it would look for, or a dimension that you would look for, is a dimension maybe pulling from here to here, right? Or that number can also be at an angle, right? As long as it's going from an endpoint to an endpoint. But if it's circumscribed, it'll go from, a side like this to this one. That's that's a circumscribed. So this is a circumscribed, which is what you have sitting right here along the top. And then this here going down, this is an inscribed, right? So that's going to be your major difference between which one of those you're going to select anytime you're creating a polygon here in the in AutoCAD, right? So that's kind of one of those concepts that you need to kind of fully understand. Inscribed versus circumscribed, right? So do I have this dimensioning going to an endpoint or not? Here's another key for you here is that anytime you see that dimension, always look after your dimension point here. So from this point, if this runs into nothing, and you can see that from this endpoint, and I go just follow this extension line, and if it hits nothing, you have an inscribed. If you see this and it goes along with this line here, that's going to be your hint for circumscribed. So that's my kind of little hint for you there if you run into doing this stuff in the future. Okay, so with all of the stuff that we do have here, let's go ahead and start creating this 3D shape or model here. All right, so let's go ahead and switch over to an isometric view. I'm just going to select this corner here. It should rotate it around. And then I'm going to take a look at these 3 different options that I gave you in order to create a cylinder, right? Let's take a look at this one first here. So we can do a revolve on this one, right? And we can jump down here, choose revolve, select this shape here, enter. And then I have to select the 2 points to define the axis of revolution. So I'm just going to select this endpoint here, going down to that endpoint, right? Looks like it was unable to do that. Let me try that one more time. So let's go to revolve. Let's select this object here, enter. And it may be that I didn't select that endpoint to that endpoint. There we go. And then it's going to go 360. If I hit the enter button, you'll see that that one is automatically created for us. Let's jump over to a shades of gray. Now we can take a look at that one. So that's one way of creating this one. All right. So I have that method. The next way I can do this is that I can extrude, is what I'm showing you next. So I can select here, enter, and then send this down a distance of 22. You can see that what I have here is that I don't have that chamfer there. And let me go ahead and turn this grid off. And we'll create that chamfer here at the bottom by going to the solid tab here. Then underneath the drop down of fillet edge here, I'm going to go to chamfered edge, distance. I'm going to type in 1, enter. And then it's going to assume that the second one, I'll just hit enter again. Then I'll select this edge at the bottom, enter for preview, and one more enter. And now you see that I do have that chamfered edge there. The last option that you do have here is that I can use a primitive one, right? Let me jump back to the home tab. I can go down to a cylinder. It's going to ask me to click a base point or the center point for it. I'll click here. It says, give me the radius. Well, I do know the diameter, so I'll select the word diameter here, type in 10, enter, and then I have to give it its direction. I can come down and type in 22, right? And then I can go ahead and put that same chamfer at the bottom of this. Totally up to you which method that you want to use. I'm going to leave that method up to you, so you can select out of any one of these cylinders that you want to use. The one that I'm going to keep is going to be this one here. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete this cylinder here. And I'm also going to delete this cylinder here. Okay. Next thing I need to do is that I need to go ahead and start creating my helix for this, right? But before I do that, I need to kind of give it some a place to start. Okay. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to go ahead and put my cutter profile right here at this quadrant. And I hope that it's going to give me a quadrant. I know it's at a 3-dimensional, but let's go ahead and stand this up first, right? So let's go ahead and select here. I'm just going to put a window around it. I'll select the red axis here, and then I'll click here. And that's going to stand it up for me. Let's go ahead and hit the escape button. And then what I'm going to do is that, let's go ahead and make this a wireframe so hopefully we can see it a little bit clearer. I'm going to go ahead and move this. So I'm just going to select this object. Let's zoom in a little bit to it. I'm going to select here. I'm going to hit the space bar one time, and I'm just using grips here. I'm going to zoom out, and then I'm going to go and see if I can find the quadrant here. And there it is. It gives me the quadrant. So I'm just going to select that quadrant here. Hit the escape button. And now let's take a look at this in the front view just to show you what you should be looking at. You can see that I do have that cutter profile showing here. Okay, let's jump back to that isometric that we was at. Next, let's go ahead and create our helix. Now I'm going to create this helix here on top of this, and then I'm just going to move this shape up anywhere in between it. So I'm going to go to the helix, right? And the helix command, I got to remember where it's at. And it should be sitting underneath the drawer, helix. Perfect. Okay, so let's zoom into here. So where do I want to put the center of that helix at? Well, it's going to be at that center. So I'm going to click there. And now it's asking me, where do I want to start? Where's the basic radius of it? Now I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and I'm going to pick that same quadrant that I picked earlier, which is located here. It could be that quadrant or that midpoint. I'll click here. Now it's asking me, do I have a spiraling effect? And the answer to this is going to be no. So I just want you to go ahead and hit enter. All right. That tells me that it's not going to spiral anywhere. Depending on how you want this to go, you can send it going down this direction, or you can send it going up this direction, right? You're going to see that it's going to spiral depending on how you want this to happen. But before I give it a distance here, I need to specify the turn height. Turn height is nothing more than telling it what's the pitch. So if I go to turn height, I'm going to type in that number that I had, which is 1.5, hit enter. And now you're going to see that this thing can and will spiral and spin and spin and spin and spin, right? Now the overall height of my cylinder is somewhere at what, 22? But I'm going to send this thing down a little bit further than 22. Let's call it 50. Okay, so now we have our helix created, we have our cutter profile created, and we have our cylinder somewhere on the inside of this. I need to select that cylinder, right? So if I kind of hover up to it, you're going to see that I will find the cylinder. I'm going to switch my gizmo to a move gizmo. I'm going to grab this blue one, and then I'm just going to come down. Now you can kind of put in a number if you want to. You know, you can put somewhere around 15. So long as it's going down, and I type in 15, I can put that somewhere in between there. That's going to be perfect for what we're going to need, right? Okay. This next part may take a little bit of time depending on how fast or slow your computer is, but we're going to use the sweep function here. So I'm going to go to sweep. I'm going to select my cutter profile, right? And then I'll hit enter. And then it's going to ask me for the path. And the path will be our helix that we created. Give it a second, and then it should cook for a little bit. And once again, this is going to depend on how fast or slow your computer is, how it's going to create the next helix part, right? So we're going to give it a little bit of time, and it should be done here in a second. I hope I don't have too much stuff open on my computer. There it is. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at this from the top view, because that's what I'm going to need to do in order to select these next two components, right? Okay. So I have a helix on the inside, and I have a cylinder somewhere. So here, this outside ring here is going to be my helix that I created. And right here on the inside should be that cylinder that I created, right? I have both of them on top of each other. So I'm going to use the subtract. The first thing we need to select is the object that I want to keep. So I'm going to select this inside circle here. Enter. Then I'm going to select the object that I want to subtract from it, right? So I'm going to select this circle here, and then I'll hit enter. Okay, I'm going to give it a little bit of time, and it should be done now. Let's go ahead and take a look at this back in that isometric view. So I'm just going to kind of spin this around. Let's look at the left, come around this way to the front, and then I'll select this isometric. You know what? Let's go ahead and leave it back at the front. And then let's take a look and see what our creation have here. So I'm just going to go here and take a look at it in shades of gray. And you're going to see that we do have what we tried to create there, right? Okay, so we have exactly what we wanted. Let's go ahead and look at this in an isometric view. We have a top of this. Now this where it might get difficult is selecting the center here at the top, because we really don't have a center anymore. So if I try to draw a line, and let's see if it's going to do this for us. And I'm going to try to go to the center of this. So if I shift and right click and I go find the center, it may not find it. And which is kind of one of the things I was afraid of, but I can come all the way down here to the bottom and I can find that center. So I'll left click there and then come a line straight up through the top of this, right? Okay. Let's take a look and see where that bottom line actually clicked from. I'm going to switch back to the wireframe. And you can see that that line did indeed go all the way down to the bottom. So that's going to give me a huge benefit here. It's because when I come back to the top, I can use the lengthen command and shrink this down to where I need it to be. So I can go to the modify. Then I can choose lengthen. Then I'm going to choose the total option. type in 22, enter. And then I'm just going to select this top line here. All right, let's go ahead and hit the escape button. And then we're going to move this shape to that center, right? So I'm just going to use a regular move command. I'm going to select this object here, enter. I'm going to go find the geometric center. So I'm just going to shift and right click, choose geometric center, click it there. And then I'm going to come and find that endpoint and click here. Okay. All right. So now we have our shape created exactly where we want it. Okay. So now with this in the center here, what we need to do is figure out what side are we going to create this angle part on. So what I want you to take a look at is that if I go to the top view, and you can see that this side here is going to be the side if I look at this in the front view. So this is not where I want to put that shape at. What I mean by that is if I come back to here, I need to create that on one of these flat sides. So therefore, I need to take a look at this going that direction, right? So that's where it's going to give me that flat side at. You can see where I can create this now along this edge. So I'm just going to rotate to this view. And the next thing I'm going to do is that I need to create my UCS so it's looking at this view correctly. So what I'm going to do is go to the drop down and I'm going to find this one that says view. So this is going to reorient my UCS to this view. So once I select that, if you look at the bottom left, you can see the X and the Y is going in the right direction. Now I'll go ahead and create this line from here going this direction, right? And now you can give it any number as long as it's not too small, but I want this big enough to see it. So let's go ahead and make it 10. I'll go ahead and hit escape from this point. I'm going to select this line here. I'll select this grip. Go ahead and hit the space bar twice. I'm looking for the word rotate here at the bottom. Now this is going clockwise, so therefore this is going to be a negative number. So I'll just type in -30. And I meant to hit copy on that. Let's go ahead and do that one more time. Let me go ahead and select this line here again. Space bar twice. It's going to go to rotate. I'm going to select the word copy. And then I'll just type in 30. Okay. Let's go ahead and hit the escape button here. Draw a line from this endpoint here going straight down. Then I'm just going to fillet these two together. So F, enter. Our fillet radius should automatically be set to 0. So I'm just going to select this line here and select this line. Remember that you have to select where you want to keep. Okay. So now this is all done correctly. I'm going to go ahead and switch my UCS back to the world coordinate system. Let's go ahead and take a look at this on the top. Rotate it around here. And then what I'm going to do is take a look at this in an isometric view. Okay. So now I have this rotated to the right orientation. I'll use the extrude command. I'm going to select this shape here. Hit enter. I'm going to send this going in the up direction, a distance of 6.85. And now I need to place this line here, or this shape, onto that, right? Before I do that, I have to join these together. And hopefully I didn't miss a step here, but let's see. If I select those three and I hit join, it did convert them all into one polyline. Okay. Sometimes it acts a little funny if it's not truly in line with the UCS. Okay. But anyway, I have this where I need it. Now, one line becomes super important here. Remember that this line that we created earlier here, that's an important line. That's going to give me that axis. What I need either is that line to create the axis, or I need that center point, right? Either one of these are going to work. So I'm going to use that point there at the top. But before I do that, let's go ahead and just use the regular move command. Let's select this profile that we created. Go ahead and hit enter from this endpoint. And I'm going to take it to this top midpoint here. Okay. So now we have this part created. We're going to use the Revolve command again. So I'm going to go to Revolve. What am I going to select is the profile that I need to select here. Hit enter. And now I need to tell it, where do I want this thing to spin around? I want it to spin around the Z component here. So I can either select these two endpoints, or I can tell it to go around a Z component. So I'm going to say, hey, go around the Z axis. And then it's going to say, hey, it can't find it, basically because the Z axis is here and I accidentally made a mistake on here. I would need to move this shape from that endpoint to the origin of this. Or I could select this, and then I could select that square there, and then I can place it right on that endpoint here. And I might have to zoom in here for it to go and find it. And if it's kind of picking that shape there, I'm going to shift and right click and tell it that, hey, I'm only looking for an endpoint, and then I can select there. All right, and now that's actually the Y component there. Let's go ahead and spin it around this way. Let's go to Revolve, select that shape there, hit enter, tell it that I want to spin it around the Y component. It should automatically find that and tell it 360. I can just hit enter, and then we can subtract that, right? So if that was a little bit confusing, and I'll go ahead and finish this for you if you want to finish it this way, I'll subtract this. The object that I want to keep first is going to be that. Go ahead and hit enter, and then the object that I want to subtract will be this shape, and go ahead and hit enter, and then it's going to create that around it. But if you didn't want to do it that way, and that way is kind of getting a little bit annoying, and you didn't want to move that UCS, and I'm going to go back to where that UCS is gone, we can use this endpoint here to do that as well, right? And we can use the Revolve command. Remember, select the profile, enter, and then I can select both of these endpoints, right? I can select this endpoint here, coming straight down to that endpoint here, and then I can just type in the 360, enter, and there it is, right? So either one of those methods, so deciding if you want to move that UCS, or you can select those two endpoints, whichever one is easier to you, go ahead and use that option. Then we're going to go ahead and do a subtract, just like we did with the other one. Select the object I want to keep first, just going to be this shape here. Go ahead and hit enter, and then select this is what I'm going to use to subtract this. All right, now we can finally get rid of that line that's in the middle there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to join these together. In 3D terms, it's called a union. So I'm going to go to union, and then I'm going to select both of these, enter. And now all this should be together, right? Let's go ahead and take a look at this in shades of gray. All right, and now let's go ahead and take a look at this in kind of many different views of it, right? So hopefully this was kind of informative to you, and you kind of learned a little bit about how you can create some threads and things of that nature. And like I said, I usually give this to my class just to do some three-dimensional stuff, and it's kind of created as extra credit, but it's kind of useful to understand how some of this stuff is created, right? So thank you for tuning in to another episode here. Thank you for watching. And for those of you who are subscribing and continuing to come back, go ahead and leave me a comment below if there's something else you would like to see me do. And once again, thank you for watching, and until the next video.